You outside of Parliament today, and if you didn't know, it was World Radio Day. That's what we're celebrating. Lobby group Right to Know is launching the hashtag Love Your Community campaign. It's a call to build and strengthen community media. We're joined by Community Organiser for Right to Know, Thami Nkosi. Great to have you with us, Thami. Let's start with the importance of radio, because it's incredible, but many South Africans still relying, especially in rural areas, on radio to hear news and entertainment, especially in their own languages.
I mean, I think, one can never overstate the importance of radio. I mean, you go back in as far as the days of the liberation struggle in the country, that in itself was critical to kind of mass mobilization and, information dissemination. You look at the issues like your push radio back in the 1982, used by community activists as a way of rallying society behind the call to actually go out there and protest against the then apartheid regime. So I think community radio remains the most critical element that could actually galvanize society to be able to have a dialogue, to be able to have a conversation and essentially exchange information and put some of the issues that they have.
Well, let's clarify this. I mean, SABC radio is very important, by the way. I was looking today, 72% of market share. But that's mostly commercial. You're talking about community stations. Why are you so passionate about those?
Those are the closest. I think, the proximity to communities simply means that the access is easy. For example, a grandmother that has a service delivery issue, for example, in Kanduli in the Eastern Cape, can simply walk into the community radio station because it's stationed exactly within her own parameters. So it's almost like a vehicle that you can simply access on the go at the spur of the moment to actually be able to transform or transmit whatever message that you want to do. So these are medias that are centered in a community to serve the community and are accessible to the community and actually function as a voice to, open up the space for communities to have conversations about the issues that are pertinent to them.
So it's interesting because many people want a global view, or, we're all connected in broadcasting, but you're talking about the issue of people being connected locally.
That's the most beautiful thing, that it affords grassroots movement, grassroots activities to actually find expression in the broader, conversation or into the broader public space. So in essence, there's a connection between community radio and what would be, for example, SABC stations, because then there's always a relationship, and you can see even with, presenters going from community radio into SABC. So there's always that connection that stories can be, brought into the public space by community radio and then picked up by your SABC radio, for example, and then finds expression into the national discourse. So it's a third tier of media is a very important tool as well. So
we know there are these amazing community stations. I think Josie FM has about 600,000, more than 600,000 listeners. But how are the others doing? What is the state of community radio?
I think it's a double jeopardy, really. It's not all doom and gloom. I'll take just a simple case of Alex FM that has gone, through a very difficult
this is
time.
Alexander
Yes, Alexander FM. Yeah, that has gone through a difficult time. They have not, they've not set for an AGM in the past 4 years, and that's against the law. They have, against the ICASA regulations. They've changed boards at least 3 times. So, the sustainability question as well, to say community radio stations don't have as much funds to be able to sustain themselves. Suntech had pulled some of them off air, I think about 15, because they owed about 30 million in transmission, fees. So there's a danger that we are running to say our community media is actually suffocating, primarily because they can't generate enough revenue for sustainability. They can't also generate enough, revenue to professionalize even community radio, because, you need quality journalism to get the stories, to do investigative issues on the ground, at the community level. And as a result, most of the community radio stations would shut down, and also some political infiltration into spaces of governance. You find political parties sitting.
So even there.
You find political parties sitting at board, putting their people in the board, and as a result, the station becomes a PR, propaganda machinery for a particular interest group. Yeah. Sometimes it's also corporate takeover. those who, those who pay the most advertising, then as a result define what becomes of the community radio station. So any corporation that would give them as much money that would raise the revenue for the radio station defines what becomes the modus operandi of the radio station. So they're under threats, under pressure, but I think we know they can be saved. We know we can
well,
actually...
finding help with independence, though, you're talking about two different things, or maybe they can stand on their own, so it helps. They
can stand on their own, but I think we were not necessarily clued up when we took up the whole kind of community radio, because, if you look at from 1995, there was 96 radio stations, and now we're sitting at about 200 and something community radio. So I don't think we thought of the uptake. And as a result, we put systems in place to be able to to sustain that sector as a result. So for me, I think one of the calls that we're making is to say, can we get the government to somehow find a sustainable funding model to make sure that community radio stations can survive and actually generate income.
Okay, so we're showing that poster, Love Your Community Radio. This is the call for funds. Just tell me more about the campaign.
So this is a very simple campaign where we're simply saying, look, politicians have come in and take over your community radio station. Certain groups have come in and take over your radio station. As a result, these community radio stations are not serving your interest. It's time to claim them back. By virtue of them being community radio station, it simply means that 60% of the stations should be community owned. So what we're calling for here is to say community members must claim back that space and understand that this is a space where it enhances active citizen participation into the democratic dispensation. So our call is for communities to rally behind their community radio stations, support it more, get involved in the ins and outs, and not relent the power to interest groups out there to actually take control of it. So
you're not saying government give the funds, you're saying communities support your own stations?
What we're calling on for the government to do is to increase the advertising spend, because we believe if they increase the advertising spend and give to community radio stations, for example, that would help in the sustainability of the community radio station. They won't be running out to go to Tiger Brands or whoever to get the money, and then as a result they neglect the community issues, but they're playing all the Tiger Brands adverts all the time and no longer serving the community. So what we're saying is that the government needs to then develop a sustainable funding model, but also they take some of their advertising spend. At the moment it's about 10% that they're spending on community radio. So we're saying increase it to 30%, and that would help the community radio stations to generate some of the funds that they need to sustain themselves, even though we know he who pays you controls you. We will fight that battle later on to say, no, by virtue of you giving the radio stations the money, we don't mean that you must control them now. So that's another battle that would fight. For now, we're fighting for the survival of the community radio stations and getting communities to rally behind, hold accountable, assist the station to generate the content that is relevant to the community, involve the community. So we're calling for community involvement and ownership, and then, rallying behind the station to also seek alternative funding models and stuff.
Isn't there a natural success? So Josie FM, if it's this big, I mean, that's like a commercial station. You've got the clout to pick and choose your advertisers. They will come naturally. Or is it the startup that's very slow and that needs support?
It's essentially a startup. And I think there's, different community radio stations would adopt a different model of kind of raising funds, and Josie FM, like you're saying, is one of the examples. But I think it may not necessarily work for a community radio station somewhere in Gofimvaba or somewhere in
where you've got a small community.
Yes. So what we're saying is that those that are able to generate income, whether through advertising or whatever, we would not necessarily tamper with them, so long as they remember the licensing conditions to say it's not about that advertising that brings money. You must keep the community central to how you operate, then that's fine. But the biggest thing for us is to say the government needs to pay particular attention to the radio stations that are particularly struggling right now to stay afloat. And that's where we want to kind of push the concerted effort to simply say that's the element that we need to push.
And I see that you guys have been talking about citizen media as well, so news sort of generated by people on the ground. Is there any dangers there? I'm so interested because of where journalism is going. Is there any need to say, no, we need journalism to be more professional? We have processes where you get rights of replies and things like that, fact checking, you try and avoid fake news. Is there any danger to citizen news?
It's always, you know, I mean, with everything that you kind of progressively try and do, there's always a counter argument to it. But I think as a social movement, we are for, you know, citizen journalism. Our understanding is that I know what happens in my house better than anybody else who would come from elsewhere and be transported into an area. And they may do an investigation and get a lot more nuanced story, but it's important that I tell my story at the same time. So it's a very difficult balancing act, and I would say, no, it's not a danger. It's an enhancing position for me. If I put the story across and a journalist has the skills to, you know, investigate a little further and get underneath the story, it almost feels like a collective process where we're able to gather information and fact check and actually be able to put some stories into the public.
And you're making me think maybe if enough people have a voice, then the truth becomes clear.
Yep, the more people have the voice, the more at least we can, you know, get to the facts quicker, the more we can get a lot more people willing to kind of share information where it may be lacking. So it actually speeds up even the gathering of information, gathering of facts, and it's much more progressive for that way.
All right, thank you for your time tonight. Community Organiser for Right to Know, Thami Nkosi. That campaign, #LoveYourCommunityRadio. We take a short break. We'll be back with more.